Hello and welcome to the Adam Shilton podcast, where we'll help you level up your life by mastering tech, boosting productivity, and sharpening your mind. I'm your host, Adam Shilton. I'm a top voice, technologist, and speaker, and I'm on a mission to help you augment your potential. Join me as we support you on your journey to becoming an irreplaceable human being. Please like and subscribe.
This episode is a replay from a keynote I gave at the Grow CFO Global Finance Summit in September of 2024, walking through best practices for technology adoption. In it, I discuss quantum computing and why it's relevant to tech decisions, generative AI advances in both cost and capability, why it's important not to get caught up in marketing fluff, why delaying tech adoption can be a good idea, why pilots are essential, decision-making biases, a framework for making the best possible tech decisions, and much, much more. If you're listening on audio and want the visuals, make sure to check out my YouTube channel using @AdamShiltonTech. Either way, I hope you enjoy.
So, welcome back, or welcome. We're now at the final session of the Global Finance Summit, which we've had some fantastic sessions over the last 2 days. Session 12, and I know because I've been in sessions before with Adam Shilton that this is going to be a good session. So if you've stayed around to listen to Adam, I can assure you it's going to be worth it. Adam is head of partnerships at Grow CFO, so he works with us, but he's also the founder of Shilton Digital. He posts a huge amount of great stuff on LinkedIn. I'm one of his huge fans, in actual fact. Nothing to do with the fact he works for us, but Adam has taught me most of the things I seem to know about AI, and we frequently have techie discussions about it. So I'm really looking forward to leveraging the technology for best practice adoption. Leveraging technology, Adam, that's going to be fantastic. I'd like to say a quick thank you, of course, before we kick off, to our partners who've made the 2 days that we just had possible: Xander, Aquila, Mayday, Lucidity, and our own Grow CFO Future CFO program. The sessions that we're running have all been applicable for CPE and CPD. For those of you that are claiming CPE, you'll be used to the idea that we put 3 polling questions up during the session. And just about as I'm about to hand over to Adam, I'm going to launch that very first poll. And that's a sneaky one, so we can find out who the CPAs are in the audience. Okay. Adam, over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. And yes, it's wonderful to be here again. It seems only like yesterday we had the last summit. I can't believe how much has happened since then. So
Huge amount has happened since then, Adam. A huge amount.
Yes, there we go. So welcome to this session. As I say, it's a pleasure to be presenting again. So today we're going to be looking at best practices for tech adoption in your finance team. So my slides move across. There we go. The quote here shows a stat relating to AI and machine learning, but the scope of tech we'll be covering today will be much wider. So it's going to be my job to arm you with a set of best practices to make your tech adoption a success, essentially. But the greatest risk with any project isn't just losing money, it's wasting valuable time, or worse, leaving you in a worse position than when the project started, right? So we're going to start by looking at some recent innovations in tech, so you can see how far we've already progressed and what this means to you, as well as helping you keep your eye on the horizon and start thinking about what the future holds. Now, we're going to look at tech segments that are relevant to the Office of the CFO and how you can start thinking about ROI when it comes to AI and automation. But then we'll also move on to giving you a step-by-step framework for how to think about assessing, selecting, and implementing these tools for technology in general, not just within the context of AI and automation, even though, as Kevin knows, I do like talking about it. So what do I want you to take away today? As a result of this talk, I want you to be equipped with a set of best practices to identify, select, and implement technology within your finance team. Now, a couple of notes on me. As Kevin said, I now form part of the Grow CFO team, so I'm head of partnerships. And it's my job to ensure you, our community, have knowledge and understanding of the latest finance tech in the industry. But outside that, I've spent the past 10 years in tech, helping SMEs and a few larger enterprises assess and select software. I've given more software demos than I can count, and more recently became a technology influencer with a following of over 25,000 superstars. And as Kevin said earlier, alongside my work at Grow CFO, I'm a writer, speaker, and software consultant. So let's get dug in. What's going on in tech right now? So before we launch into the strategic and tactical stuff, I want to bring you up to speed with a few of the latest innovations we've seen this year, as well as a few thoughts on where we're headed. So we're going to have a start. Well, we're going to start by having a look at quantum computing. Now, I can already hear you saying, Adam, how on earth does quantum computing relate to our work in finance? Which is fair, but I'll tell you. As technology evolves, it's not going to be our ability to develop software that will become a bottleneck. It will be the hardware that it runs from. Now, we've seen the likes of NVIDIA explode recently, given the demand for their AI hardware. The next leap will be in quantum computing. For those of you not familiar with quantum computing, quantum computers have the ability to process massive amounts of data. So instead of standard computing bits, which can either be 0 or 1, quantum qubits exist in a superposition, and we won't continue with this terminology, I promise, of both 0 and 1 with the ability to use all possible states between them. In short, this gives them massive processing power, but in turn, they consume massive amounts of energy and need to run in cold and sealed environments, which relates to something quite topical recently. Actually, China have developed more tech that runs at room temperature. So I think there's another tech war going on here. But when I asked Claude, so Claude from Anthropic, generative AI tool, about the difference between normal and quantum computing, it gave me a bit of a fun example. So let's say you have a 3D model of a maze. So traditional computing would be like using a pencil to draw a line through the maze and then rubbing out the lines that reach dead ends until you're only left with the line that led to the exit. But this takes time, especially if the maze is massive, right? But quantum computing would be like flooding the entrance to the maze with a bucket of water, where one of the streams will more or less instantly pour out the exit, which leads us on to the first real use case for quantum computing, which is supply chain and route planning. Now, when calculating routes or analyzing complex supply chains, there are numerous variables. I'm guessing most of you guys are good at maths, right? More so than me. So you know that the more variables, the bigger the total number of combinations. So a 4-digit combination using any number between 0 and 9 will produce 10,000 combinations, 5-digit number, 100,000, 10-digit number, 10 billion combinations. And this is referred to as combinatorial explosion. As the number grows, the time to solve the problem increases. But quantum computing solves this by allowing us to evaluate as many possible scenarios at the same time. Now, whilst we're talking about numbers, cryptology is an area that we need to be mindful of. So one of the greatest threats to any business is cybersecurity. Right now, encryption uses huge numbers to protect information, and to break encryption would take traditional computers millions of years to break, but not with a quantum computer. So you just need to be mindful of this. Just like at the moment we're fighting AI, with AI in terms of cybersecurity, it will evolve over time. And then to just briefly mention some other areas in the financial service space, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan exploring areas to optimize trading strategies with this sort of technology. In energy, ExxonMobil and BP investing in quantum computing to better manage energy resources. Manufacturing, BMW and BASF, quantum technologies to develop new materials that will help improve their manufacturing processes. And then in pharma, you've got Pfizer and Roche partnering with quantum computing companies to accelerate drug discovery. So what is the key takeaway here? How does it relate to best practices implementing technology? Well, let me ask you this. Do you need a quantum computer? No, of course you don't. For 99% of you on this session, you won't have the amount of data or the complexity of process to warrant a quantum computer. Yet we are all guilty of looking at these bright, shiny technologies and immediately thinking, oh, we need to use this stuff to keep up. But we don't have any use cases to support it, nor is the technology sufficiently proven. This sets us up quite nicely for 2 steps in the framework I'm going to give you towards the end of this presentation. Number 1 is filter. before we make any decisions, we need to filter out any noise. So don't get roped into the bright, shiny lights. And then number 2 is delay. You don't always want to do this, but whenever a new technology becomes available, we need to allow time for it to become proven in the marketplace. There's a great article written by Ethan Mollick. So he's professor of management at the Wharton School, and he released an excellent article called "The Lazy Tyranny of the Weight Calculation." Okay. So in the context of generative AI, when GPT-3 was first released, it was good, but it had its limitations. People all over the world were scrambling to build it into their workflow or use it to extend their software, and a huge amount of time and a huge amount of money went into it. And then guess what? GPT-4 was released and it changed the game. It could do so much more than the previous model, making a huge amount of the work that companies had invested in configuring previous models made them obsolete. In Ethan's words, we could have waited. So this will lead us into our next topic, which is generative AI. But before we go there, I want you to hold on for a second, because we do have a hardware consideration now, and this is more relevant, I think, within the next 6, 12, 18 months. So I'm going to leave this screen up for a second. You can read through it if you like. It's a snapshot of one of my chats with Copilot. But to date, large language models have been run in the cloud. But now we're seeing more use cases for end users installing large language models locally on their devices. So not collected to the cloud, just having their computers run large language models. Security is generally the primary concern. Yeah, if the suppliers aren't using the data to train their models. Now, I tried this a few months ago. I failed dismally. Like, I installed a model and it took 15 minutes for it to respond to me, which, it just wasn't practical. But we're now seeing more computers come to market with hardware that's better equipped to run these AI technologies. So what does this mean? At some point, you might need to think about investing in new hardware for your business, but don't go jumping there yet because it is still quite early. You can see in the screenshot here, there's mention of NVIDIA's RTX laptops, which I don't know whether they're released or not, but you see where the trend is going, right? Previously, we'd have a computer filling an entire room, but now we've got a next generation of laptops equipped with AI technologies to run all of these advanced software systems on them. What you might have also clocked is you can see my history from my Copilot conversations in there as well. Now, I haven't used it in a while, so I went through a phase of Copilot before then moving on to trial other tools. So the last one was June, but hey, if you want a pork curry recipe, I've done the research, just drop me a note. Plus, interesting fact, taking a cold shower after exercises causes muscle restriction. You heard it here first. You're welcome. Anyway, let's get back to the plot. So over the past year, we've seen more advancements in model capability, as well as drastically reduced costs when using these more advanced models. So you can see some of the pricing on screen. Essentially, cost a bit back in 2020. Price went through the roof in 2023 last year, and now the cost for the most advanced models has come right back down again. So we'll see how this ties to the weight calculation in a second, but let's use a bit of an example. We'll set this in a context, and we'll use a fictional company that's using AI as part of its customer service, whereby it might build AI into a customer service chatbot. So they might process 100,000 customer interactions per month. Each takes 500 tokens. So either way, spending $1,000 back in $1,000 back in 2020, spending more in 2023 as the price for the more advanced models skyrocket, and then that comes right back down again to $1,000 in 2024, while still retaining the same level of capability. So could that company have waited until now, until the technology was more advanced and more proven? There's no right or wrong answer to this, but companies could have waited, and I'm sure lots of companies would have gone through a lot of pain over the past couple of years investing money into this, to then find that actually if they just started this year, they might be in a similar place. But there we go. And for anyone who's more interested about pricing of models, I'm sure we'll share the slides after the fact so you can have a look. But this is mostly relevant to companies that have got developers using APIs, for example. So we're going to quickly move on to having a look at the evolution of some of the chatbots that we use during our day-to-day, the stuff that's actually usable to us as lay people, not developers. So let's just touch on some of the ChatGPT advances from this year. We had GPT-4o released, where the O stands for Omni. This means that it can deal with data of different types, whether it be text, images, spreadsheets, voice, you name it. There have been impressive improvements in the voice capability, with lots of people now talking to AI instead of typing. And then more recently, OpenAI launched the memory feature. And this is pretty cool, where it will remember your interactions in an effort to tailor your conversations. Now, I made this prediction a few years ago. I said context will become less and less relevant as context will become less and less relevant as the models become more intelligent. Yeah. But there's also been improvements in the code interpreter. So if you wanted to use it for data, visualization, coding tasks, that's pretty cool as well. Now, recent news, GPT-5, the model that they said was going to end the world, or whatever the fearmonger said, right? Now, I don't think it's going to be that drastic, but I wanted to break off for a second to say that it was due for release this year, but now we're not going to see it until either next year or the year after, as OpenAI continue to refine it. So is expected to achieve PhD level of intelligence. Interesting to see what that means, with advanced reasoning and problem solving, but it's more likely to be task specific. So it'll excel in certain areas whilst be limited in others. And it's only going to cost you $2,000 a month. No, that's all hearsay at the moment. Whether that is the case or not, we don't know, but it is pegged to be a considerable step up. Now, about 5 minutes ago, I saw something come across my desk which relates to a new model by OpenAI called Strawberry. Now, this is more of an agent type process. So Strawberry is meant to be better at planning. So it will think about a task. It will think about stuff in sequence, which will be really interesting to see. So it's meant to be really good for planning, maybe not so good for more traditional writing, for example. Moving on to Claude. We've seen some big improvements here as well. So you'll be able to see on screen some of the visualizations you can now produce in Claude. And this was a very simple prompt. Yeah. Make up some data, show me some stunning visualizations, done in a single line. This would have been impossible a few years ago. Yeah. This is done using something called artifacts, which aren't too dissimilar to the code interpreter in ChatGPT, where it will preview code, produce visualizations, and create documents that you can easily copy. And this ties quite nicely into their new project capability. And this relates, well, it's similar to GPTs in ChatGPT, whereby you can give a custom instruction and you can upload knowledge. Now, the knowledge in Claude, you can upload the equivalent of a 500-page book. Yeah, so if you do have complex documentation that you're wanting to use for reference, or have big PDF documents that you're wanting to search through quickly, this is a really good use case. And now you can bring team members in as well. So you can have multiple people working on projects together for group coding tasks, group data analysis projects, group content and writing projects. Plus, the artifacts, like you see here, can be added to the knowledge of the bot to further refine its responses as you speak to it over time. So yeah, it's really good. Now, Copilot. Yeah, so this year we saw the release of Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365, and don't get me wrong, I do love it. Yeah, and this is where Microsoft built OpenAI's models into the applications that we use every day. And it also gives you the ability to chat to your data, kind of. So if you open Copilot in Office, you can say, oh, find me documentation relating to this, or show me the emails from this individual over the last 3 months. So that search piece becomes a lot better. It's probably been the hottest topic I've discussed with my colleagues and clients over the past few months. And for anybody interested, I did do a post. You can see it on screen. Again, read up when we share the slides. But this lends itself quite nicely to the previous step that we mentioned in our framework, which is filter. So Microsoft are the masters of marketing. And everyone that saw the marketing videos for Copilot were drooling at the concept of building it into their setup. I know I was. And don't get me wrong, for junior team members that aren't Excel pros and need a bit of a helping hand, how to improve the quality of their work, especially for, tidying up emails, adding to documentation, rewording stuff, Copilot could be a game changer. But for all you Excel pros out there, because I know a lot of you are, unfortunately, Copilot in Excel isn't going to revolutionize your workflow. But on the flip side, Copilot in OneNote, Teams, and Outlook is a really good productivity tool. So as I say, there are pros and cons. And incidentally, if you are looking to build AI into Excel, we shared a really interesting post today from Richard Nero, who's a close friend of mine. He's an Excel expert, and he talked through adding something called Excel Labs into Excel. And this is where you can connect Excel to OpenAI and write more complex prompts and do amazing things with your data that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So check that out from today. Anyway, the next step in our framework is pilot. So if there's ever any opportunity to pilot a specific tool to run a proof of concept, we should 100% do this. So in the case of Copilot, I've recommended that teams buy a license or two to test out use cases and efficiency gains before rolling it out to the wider team. But anyway, I could talk about generative AI forever and a day, but it's probably best that we bring the conversation back around to more finance related stuff. So for those of you who attended my last session at the summit earlier this year, you may have heard my analogy of the difference between virtual hands and virtual brains. So I want you to keep this in mind as we continue. Primary focus of automation tools is to carry out the job of digital hands, so mirroring mouse clicks and keyboard strokes. And the primary task of AI and analytics tools is to carry out the job of a digital brain, i.e. trend analysis, forecasting, data science, those sorts of things. And generative AI now sits between the two, as there are some tasks where it can carry out the thinking and the doing at the same time. So that gap is shrinking. But put simply, you need to think in terms of, is it going to help me think better? Or is it going to help save me time? Now, as I also mentioned in my previous session, the good news is many of the tools you already use will be building AI and greater level of automation into their platforms. So the pro tip here is speak to your software suppliers and get an understanding of their released timelines, because you'll be able to better make a decision on whether to adopt a new technology versus just waiting for improvement. So this ties quite nicely to that delay step of the framework that we mentioned earlier. We always need to ask ourselves the question, is this a now project or is this a later project? So let's move on to looking at some different tech segments that could make up your CFO tech stack, split by virtual hands and a virtual brain, or digital hands and digital brain. Now, there's a lot of text on screen here, and I'm not expecting you to read through. We're not going to have enough time to do that. But again, look at the slides when they're circulated. But the reason we're here is I want to stress the importance that the tech is either relating to a problem to be solved or an ambition to be realized. We're going to talk about this in more detail in a second, but let's focus on AP automation for a second. So we've got an AP automation showcase coming up on the 26th, which I believe is the week after next. So join that if you wanted to learn even more. But relating to a problem to be solved, AP automation systems might pick up the slack when it comes to manually keying invoices, right? So the problem there is I'm losing a team member to manual data entry. Yeah. The ambition to be realized in the flip side, looking at the digital brain, is more along the right. Well, I want more cash flow analysis. I want more information on spend across suppliers and so on and so forth. So we can see here in splitting out these use cases, we've got combination of challenges to be solved and ambitions to be realized. So let's pause a second, and I really want to hit this concept home. So I've got two quotes here. So the first one is from Bill Gates. The first rule of any technology used in business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. Yeah. There's another quote from Peter Drucker, productivity guru. Absolutely love his work. There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. Okay. So our next point here is start from zero. Before you embark on any tech project, you need to take tech out of the equation, at least for a period. You can even forget about the systems that you're using right now, as they could color your decision-making and your judgment. So first, have a session that really goes into the weeds of your primary challenges. You'll probably end up with a list as long as your arm. So you need to pick up 2 or 3 main challenges where most of your pain is, because it's likely that those top 2 or 3 challenges will make 80% of the ROI that you want from your project. Then have a session that relates to your ambitions. Again, you can end up with a really long list of targets and goals, but again, focus on the top 2 or 3. So on screen here, you can see some example challenges and some example ambitions. Taking this a step further, there's multiple technologies that will help resolve these issues, and I've listed some there. But if you were to then dig deeper, you might find that the most important thing for you is to free up the time of a team member. So you go for, say, an AP automation platform. But this means that once deployed, that team member who now has time for more strategic FP&A work can either use the next tool, BI or spend management, augmented by AI machine learning to achieve that 2% spend reduction. So you can see how mapping these elements brings clarity. You don't have to do them all at the same time. And project A might lead to improvements with ambitions that you want to achieve during project B. So let's wrap this together quickly. Framework so far, we've got start from zero, which we just discussed, map challenges and solutions without giving any mind to tech. Filter, ensure you're going to a deeper level and not getting distracted by the bright, shiny lights. Delay, determine whether this is a now project or a later project. And then pilot, where possible, go through a proof of concept with a lower level of investment to begin with. Now, I'm going to ask you to bear with me just for a second, because I want to talk a little bit more about decision making now. So this goes wider than just tech selection. I recently stumbled across a book called Decisive, How to Make Better Decisions in Life and Work by Chip and Dan Heath. And it's fabulous. I'd recommend you pick it up. But it revolves around the concept of decision biases, of course, how we can make better decisions. So one is a narrow frame where we look at things in terms of either do it or don't do it as our only options, even though there's generally more than that. Confirmation bias, where we look for information that supports existing beliefs. Emotions, where we may make rash decisions based on emotions. And then preparing to be wrong, which is where we might want to factor in tripwires, which alert us to emerging problems. But the one that I want to focus on here is a narrow frame, because we often look at a set of tools and decide whether to procure or not without widening our options beforehand. So I'm going to tell a little story from the book, which revolves around a company that were assessing suppliers for a certain project. Now, forget this particular project, but instead of doing the standard beauty parade and deciding on just one, they did a proof of concept with all three. So these pilot projects with all three suppliers was more of an investment in the short term, but the ability to work with all of these suppliers enabled them to make much better decisions on who they wanted to work with. This meant in the long term, even though they'd spent more upfront, the scope for failure was dramatically reduced, as they knew exactly what the best route was based on the supplier they had the best relationship with that did the best job. So coming back to our discussion, if you're deciding on an AI tool, pay for ChatGPT, Claude, and Copilot for a month and keep the best one. If you're deciding on an expense app, buy all three and choose the one your team have the best user experience with. This, of course, is much easier with off-the-shelf software that you pay monthly for versus software that requires complex implementation. But even then, we can still use this methodology to advantage.
Really quick, guys, as you know, I don't have sponsors on the show. So to help me, it would be great if you could share with just one other person, leave a review, give a thumbs up, and subscribe. It really does make a difference. Now back to the show.
So let's say you're deciding on a new ERP system for the business. Got quite a lot of experience here. It would be impossible for you to implement 2, let alone 3 systems. But what's the first step in every big software project? Workshops and solution design. So you could ask 2 or 3 suppliers or vendors whether you can just pay for the workshops and solution design phase without committing to the software. You'll end up having to pay for a few days of consulting, but the learning experience will be invaluable, as you'll have an opportunity to work with the team of each company, as well as get a better feel for what the solution will look like at the end of it. You can then make the decision based on the company you enjoy working with that's providing the best solution. So let's go into the framework. We've mentioned some of the steps already, but I've included some more to give you additional guidance on what you need to go through during an assessment process. And it's a really easy framework to remember. Just think of the curve for the P. It's not easy. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of an acronym, but there we go. We will share the slides. It's fine. Anyway, let me just have a sip of water. Start from zero. To reiterate, you want to start by properly identifying what you're struggling with and what your ambitions are, irrespective of any current tech or any tech you're planning to adopt. Get the team together hash things out and come away with some clear documentation. And I've got a pro tip here. So most meeting tools will provide a transcript nowadays. So Copilot in Teams, for example, that will do a transcript. Otter is another one we hear of. There's loads on the marketplace. Not all of them will produce documentation for you. Recently, I found out that Loom, I like Loom, that does produce documentation. So standard operating procedures off the back of recordings you've done, it's really useful. But if you've got a transcript, you can drop it into an AI. Again, be mindful of security. So Claude is secure, Copilot is secure. And ask it to produce the documentation. So using this transcript from our challenge discussion, please outline our key challenges and wrap it into a nice document for us. So nice pro tip for you. Okay. But notice here, I've not mentioned anything about creating a 1,000-row spreadsheet with a ton of requirements, because features don't matter. They do and they don't. Features don't matter. Solutions to problems matter. So bear that in mind. So number 2, we've not mentioned this yet, but we need to be mindful of complexity in our process. We need to determine what the complexity of what we want to achieve is. Now, the amount of times I've given guidance to businesses that have started by saying, I don't think we're that complicated, to then find that there's no systems that do what they want to do. So the good questions to ask here are, what processes do we have that may not be standard practice across the industry or companies of our type? And then you can go into that, armed with those niche use cases. Yeah, it's those red flags need to be, nipped in the bud as soon as possible, really. Otherwise, you might find that out later and you've wasted a load of time. The next question is, what members of our team have experience across industry? Can they give us guidance on what process looks like outside of our 4 walls? So you're looking for differing perspectives here. And of course, I'm always available to chat. So a great place to find me is in the systems and technology channel in the Grow CFO Slack community. It's free, so make sure you do join. And Kevin, don't know whether you're listening in, but now might be the opportunity to drop the link.
I am listening.
Cool. So now might be the good time to drop the link to the Slack channel in the chat if you've got it to hand.
Okay, I will just go and grab that. I will have that in the chat in 2 seconds, Adam.
Thank you, sir.
Just you carry on and I will put it up there. Adam, let me know when you want to run that next poll, please.
Yeah, we can pause briefly here if you like.
Okay, I'll run that poll actually while I'm finding the link to the Slack channel.
So I'll just finish my point here. So reason it's so important to get a feel for complexity is that what you spend on licensing and implementation is directly proportionate to the amount of complexity in your business. The poll's just turned up. GFS leverage. Okay, how frequently do you and your team leverage technology within your finance function? Very frequently, occasionally, rarely, never. Pause for a few moments. How are we doing, Kevin?
Okay, we're doing fine. People are still answering that poll. I'll just give them a second or 2 more. And actually, while they're doing that, Adam, I can come back and I can put that link to the Slack community in the chat.
Fabulous.
Okay, and I've lost the chat screen. That is great. Where's the chat gone? It's there. Okay, this is to everyone. Right, there is the invitation link to the Slack channel. So please go use that and sign up. Okay, we'll end that poll and have a look at the results, Adam.
Fabulous. Oh, very good.
Yeah. See, frequently and very frequently are probably the majority of the answers. So that's good.
Steps in the right direction. Those rarely people. That's my job.
Yeah, we'll get you onto those rarely people.
Yeah, we'll get those levels up. Those are rookie numbers.
There's plenty for us to work at in the things that we've got planned for the coming months to share tech with the community, Adam.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Really excited. Cool. Fabulous. Thanks for that, guys.
Sharing.
Appreciate your feedback. Cool. So I know some companies that are tiny and spend a huge amount on software as their processes are really complicated, right? Likewise, I've heard of multi-million-dollar businesses that still use Sage 50 plus spreadsheets. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here, but it relates to complexity. Plus, don't forget, software isn't the only option. Sometimes using a person either in-house or outsourcing something is still the right move. Yeah, so if you've got those edge use cases that are really complex, a human brain might still be the right tool for the job, right? So let's move on to research. Now, before you start Googling, Binging, ChatGPTing, whatever you do, there's a few other resources I'd recommend to start building that long list of potential solutions. So I've mentioned myself. You can drop me a note. As I say, I'm in the community. I won't charge you anything. Just consider it as part of the Grow CFO community service. It's not a problem at all. But I've spent the past 10 years in this space. So happy to save you a lot of trouble if I can. The second is our tech hub. So Kevin mentioned we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming on. This is a great place where we've got some tech partners that we've validated and worked with before. So it's good to check that out before you embark on other areas. And then the third is G2. So I'm a big fan of G2. I've mentioned it before. So it's an online resource specifically dedicated to software. So you can type in a category, for example, expense management, and it will come back with relevant software search results. You've got Capterra and Product Hunt, but for me, G2 is the most intuitive. So what I'm going to do quickly, if I may, Kevin.
Yes.
Can you see that my screen's swapped here?
It hasn't for me.
Not?
No, it has not swapped, Adam. We're
Okay.
still on the same one.
Let's go again, because I want to show something that I think will be really useful to everyone. Let's do, well, how about now?
There we are. Got it.
There we go. Cool. So this is me logging into G2 with an account. Again, it's free. But what you've got when you go into your account, if you go into this little navigation at the top here, is software profile, software I use, and my lists. Yeah. So if you go into my lists, this is almost like a little shortlisting tool. I'm going to skip this. But what you can do is you can start by mapping some of the stuff that we've already said. Yeah, so you can go in and you can say, right, well, what are my reasons for switching? What problems am I trying to solve? So you can enter that in. It will then build up your requirements, make recommendations. You can then shortlist. When you've got the products in there, you can give them a score, and then you can invite your team in to be part of that exercise as well. So it's a really good repository in one of the leading software resources. And again, I'm not affiliated with G2. I just find it really, really useful.
That is clever, Adam. I've used G2 before. I've used Capterra before to find out about packages, but I never realized you could do that. That is clever.
There we go. That's what I'm here for. So we're back to the presentation now?
Yep, we're back to the presentation, Adam. Carry on.
Fabulous. Cool. And then, of course, you've got your standard online searches. Absolutely fine. But just bear in mind, you might end up with some of those bright, shiny lights on landing pages as people try and rope you in. So landing pages aren't always representative of the tech that sits behind the scenes. But I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about integrations as well, because this now more than ever needs to form part of your research, because software companies like yours don't just use one software tool, right? You use a ton. So part of the headache, which often comes with finding new technology, is checking to see whether it integrates with the tools that we use already. There's only 3 types of integration. So native integrations are where the system you're looking at has already got pre-built integrations with other systems. It's a path of least resistance. Unfortunately, this is becoming more and more now. You've then got middleware integrations where you connect applications using a platform. So simple examples are Zapier, Make, Power Automate, and so on. But then there are more advanced platforms like codeless platforms, Celonis, Tray, and Boomi. And then custom integrations are just that, where you have a developer that creates a bespoke integration between 2 systems. But watch out, some companies charge extra for native integration. So just because it's native doesn't mean it's free. Sometimes there are licensing implications, so always double check. And then the next piece is some custom integrations can be cheaper than middleware, depending on the complexity of your integration. So make sure you investigate both. Some of the integration platforms can be cost prohibitive. Number 4, filter. Going back to what we said previously, ensuring you're going a level deeper and not getting distracted by those bright, shiny lights. And the only way to do this is going to be to speak to someone at some point within the organization and get tailored demos. Unless it's an off-the-shelf solution, you need to get an impression for the sort of company you're going to be working with. I often say this because many software solutions are geared up to do similar things. And a large part of your decision should be, who do I want to work with, as well as what do I want to work with? It's painful having conversations with lots of suppliers. I know this, I've been through it. But this is where it comes back to complexity. Low complexity problems solved with off-the-shelf solutions that you can pay monthly for. You don't need to spend as much time due diligence. Absolutely fine. Whereas if it's a complex solution, you should spend more time up front. Yeah, because not doing so increases the risk that you make the wrong decision and you implement something that then has to be ripped out. Okay, 5, delay. Again, we touched on this previously. You may have discovered in your research that the solutions you're looking at are very new to the market. So the next question to then answer is, again, what if we wait? If your challenge isn't backbreaking, can you afford to hold off for 6 to 12 months to see how things mature? Or even better, is there a workaround that you can find using a combination of your existing systems and resource that will serve you in the short term? So going back to that previous example I gave, of speaking to your existing tech providers, you might uncover something new that wasn't possible before, but now is. Or is this something a developer could throw together if you pay them for a few days' work? This comes back to that decision-making piece we mentioned earlier about making our focus too narrow. What if you widened the remit so that a SaaS solution wasn't the only option? Yeah. So food for thought. Next, decide. So we're at decision point. We've outlined our problems. We know how complex they are. We've researched solutions and had a conversation with a long list of suppliers, all the time checking that this is definitely a now project and that we're not jumping too quickly into any bleeding edge tech that's likely to change over the next 6 to 12 months. With the knowledge that we've built, we've been able to widen our focus to explore alternatives, for example, through modifications to our existing setup, and we now need to decide. So that big long list needs to come down to no more than 3, and in line with how likely they are to solve your challenges and support your ambitions. It's always good to be mindful of decision criteria as well. So how are you going to rank things? We saw a bit of that in G2 when giving scores. Is your decision criteria going to be price, product timeline and roadmap, quality of support, implementation speed? These are all factors for consideration. Yeah. If it's an expensive investment, you might want to go through another round of due diligence. And again, depends on the level of investment. You might want tailored demos using some of your data. Give these companies your data. They'd be happy to set up a demo environment with it. Customer reference calls. Yeah, need to do more of these. Meetings with leadership teams to get a feel for the wider team that aren't just salespeople. It's all important stuff. And again, if it's a lower investment, you may have enough to inform a decision without going through any further hoops, but you will still have to build a business case. So here's a pro tip. Pick 3 options where you'd be happy if you went with any of them. Yeah. Put your preferred choice as option 2, the mid-level option, and then have a lower cost option and a more expensive option. More often than not, the board or your colleagues will go with the mid-tier option. And even if not, you've already decided you're happy with the other solutions, right? So the rule of 3 is very powerful. 7. We are coming up to time, so I promise I won't keep you much longer. It is late, I know that, so thanks for bearing with me. So pilot, we discussed this previously. The best way to be more certain of something is to run a pilot. This is super easy with solutions that have a free starter point or a free trial. And I remember when I was assessing data tools for a previous business, there was sometimes no mention of a free trial on the website. So I just spoke to a member of the team and they gave me one. It wasn't standard practice. So never just assume that a trial isn't available just because it doesn't say so on the website. Yeah. If there is a trial as an option, you can do this before the decision step. So you've got more data to assess and present to your colleagues. Yeah. If trials just aren't an option, then this goes back to running that mini project that we discussed earlier. So the question to ask here is, can we do the initial workshops and scoping before committing to the licensing and just pay you for the workshops? You don't have to do this with all 3 at the same time. You could do it with your preferred option and then fall back to options 2 and 3 if things don't work out, but it's all about risk at the end of the day. Now, lastly, we're coming on to implementation. This isn't so much of an issue with off-the-shelf tools. you generally find that there's online onboarding that will bring you up to speed pretty quickly and an active support team that's only a chat message away. But more complex implementations are generally split into the following phases: scoping and workshops, solution design, build, UAT, training, and go live. You should not move on to the next phase of the project until you're happy that the prior stage has been completed successfully. This is most important during the sign-off of your solution design, i.e. what you're going to get. And then after that testing, where you go out of your way to ensure that the system is fit for purpose before going live. The biggest piece of advice I can give is not to rush the scoping or the testing. Thorough scoping ensures that the system being built is the one that you actually want. And thorough testing ensures that the system that's been built is one that you can use. So the more time you spend testing, the less time you spend fixing issues after you've gone live. And there's nothing worse than having to unpick an implementation due to poor quality testing. And it's also crucial that you think in terms of project roles. This doesn't just apply to tech, but the key roles for projects are generally a project sponsor, who is someone at C-suite or board level who's advocating for the project to ensure it's successful. You've then got a project lead or a project manager that will sync with the project manager on their side to make sure that you're meeting milestones. Key user will be somebody who's using the system at an advanced level every day. Yeah, so it's important that they're involved in stuff like testing, because they're going to be the ones that are using it. End users, self-explanatory. Another tip here: sometimes software companies won't provide end user training. Sometimes they work on a train the trainer model. So it's another question to ask during due diligence: will you train our end users, or are we going to have to train our team after key users have received training? And then data owners, who are responsible for the management of data, especially if the project involves lots of historic data to be migrated. You don't have to have all of these roles, but having a mind for it is useful. Okay. So I've seen some questions come through in the chat. We can answer them. But before we see if we've got any questions, I'll leave you with this quote from Deloitte. 60% of strategic decisions are expected to be made using AI in 5 years, up from 14% currently. And I want to re-emphasize, this doesn't mean AI will make these decisions for us, but it should help us make better decisions. Yeah. On that note, and Kevin, you don't have to drop the link in the chat, but anybody who's interested, I don't know whether my screen's changed. Can you see my screen change?
Screen has changed. Yes, I'm seeing ChatGPT.
Yeah, so I created a custom bot based on this presentation. I really don't have anything better to do I? So I uploaded this entire presentation to set this context, and this is trained to answer questions based on the topic that we've gone through today. So you've got some starters there. Again, we can send a link, put it in the chat. But if you ask a question relating to tech best practices, it will use the frameworks that we've been discussing today, and it will give you answers based on best practices, as I've said before. So yeah, it's open to everybody. Pick up the link, have a chat to it, have a play, see whether you enjoy it. And then last slide, I'll re-emphasize what I always say. Don't use generative AI to do stuff for you. Use generative AI to do stuff with you. Really appreciate your time, guys. We're ahead of time. We might have to wrap up there, but thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm just looking to see if there's anything else around in the Q&A. One that's come through here from Daryl: a training tip. The Anaplan way gives you a great course on scoping through to implementation in the agile methodology. It's free, everyone should learn it. So there's a tip coming in. Thank you, Daryl. That is
fabulous.
The Q&A, actually, Adam, is empty, which is just as well, because I think we've only got 2 minutes left. If there are any questions, quickly, please just pop them in there.
No, it's fine.
It's very informative. Brilliant. Right. I am going to run the final poll, and then we're going to close the session down, Adam. Just launch that now. Just a little bit of feedback, please, folks. Was the content of today's talk relevant? For me, gosh, it was highly relevant. I talk to Adam frequently, and I've learned yet more today.
Don't show me the poll results, Kevin.
No, they're good. They're good. 70% are saying highly relevant, Adam. It's absolutely super. The one thing though that I'm looking at, and you put a first slide up that 80% of AI, I think it was AI implementations fail.
Yeah.
Now, 20 years ago in PwC, I had a similar slide that said 80% of ERP implementations fail. Now, what goes around comes around.
Absolutely. That's very similar. We've got a question, Kevin, on how to contact us outside Slack.
Can we reach Kevin another way other than Slack? You can reach either Adam or myself by email. It's adam.shilton@growcfo.net or kevin.appleby@growcfo.net. Good way of contacting us.
Yeah. First dot, second name @growcfo.net.
Yep.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much, folks. I'm going to end that poll. And actually, Adam, it ended up, I will quickly show you the results because they're good. 72% highly relevant, 23% somewhat relevant. I think you can take a huge pat on the back for that, Adam. Thank you very much. That was absolutely brilliant. It has been a brilliant summit. Thank you, everybody, for coming along, for attending. I'm going to say in absentia to everybody who's been speaking over the 2 days. Thank you again hugely. The program was sponsored by our Future CFO program. We've got a preview session for the program itself coming up next week. I think it's Thursday. If you go along to the events section within the Grow CFO homepage, you will be able to see the link to book a place on that preview session. I'd encourage you all to come along. Okay.
Fabulous. Thanks, Kevin.
Hey again, and thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like, review, and subscribe. And for more goodies, head over to adamshilton.com. Until next time, bye.